Beneath the quiet soil of South Carolina lie puzzles that defy all our modern explanations. This state is a hidden vault of ancient enigmas, holding secrets that have stubbornly resisted the tools of science and reason for generations. By the end of this journey, you will explore over 20 profound mysteries, from cosmic scars on the landscape to artifacts that could rewrite human history. We will investigate strange stone formations perfectly aligned with the solstice sun and examine a single brick that might bear an impossible message from across the Atlantic. What forgotten truths are waiting just beneath the surface of the Palmetto State? Scattered across the coastal plains of South Carolina are thousands of shallow, oval-shaped depressions that seem to defy natural logic. These are the Carolina Bays, a landscape of mysteries written directly into the earth itself. Seen from above, their geometric perfection is startling, each one a near-perfect ellipse, and they all point in the same direction, a line from the northwest to the southeast, with an eerie uniformity. There are not just a handful, but tens of thousands of them, ranging from a few hundred feet to over a mile in length, and they are often filled with dark, still water, creating a hauntingly beautiful pattern across the land. The first and most obvious question is what on earth could have made them, and the answer has eluded scientists for over a century. The leading theory for many years was a cosmic event, a massive meteorite shower that rained down across the region in a single catastrophic event. The alignment makes sense, as a shower of objects coming in at an angle would create oval craters all pointing the same way, but there is a critical problem with this idea. If a meteorite strike created these bays, we would expect to find telltale evidence, things like shocked quartz, melted rock, or fragments of extraterrestrial material buried deep within their rims. Yet, despite extensive searching, no such impact material has ever been found, not a single piece. This glaring absence forces us to look for other explanations. Perhaps they were created by a different kind of ancient violence, like the powerful winds and swirling waters of retreating glaciers during the last ice age. Some researchers propose that giant, persistent whirlpools in shallow meltwater could have scoured out these depressions. Others suggest a process called artesian springs, where pressurized water from deep underground bubbled up and eroded the soil in these distinct shapes. While these terrestrial theories are compelling, they struggle to fully explain the incredible consistency in size, shape, and most importantly, that unshakable directional alignment across such a vast area. Adding another layer to the puzzle is their immense age. Geological studies suggest these bays are ancient, possibly formed between 50,000 and 100,000 years ago, a time when early humans were just beginning to walk the continent. This means they have silently witnessed the comings and goings of entire species, the rise and fall of ancient cultures, and the dramatic climatic shifts of our planet's history. They are permanent fixtures, yet their origin story remains a blank page, so we are left with a beautiful contradiction, a landscape feature so widespread and so orderly that it screams of a single, dramatic cause, yet one that leaves behind no physical evidence of its catastrophic nature. It is as if the Earth itself decided to etch a question mark across the Carolinas, a question we are still trying to answer. The silence of the Carolina Bays was never truly empty. Long before European settlers arrived, Native American nations like the Catawba and Cherokee lived within this enigmatic landscape. For them, these were not geological puzzles, but integral parts of a living world. Oral histories and archaeological evidence suggest these basins were likely prized as seasonal hunting grounds, their water attracting game, and their unique ecology providing rich resources. Some researchers and tribal traditions propose they held deeper spiritual significance, perhaps viewed as footprints of the Creator or portals to the spirit world, making them natural sacred sites. This human layer adds profound depth to the mystery, reminding us that these features have been whispering to people for millennia, even if we have forgotten how to listen. When conventional science hits a wall, the imagination rushes in to fill the void. This is certainly true for the bays, which have attracted some truly extraordinary explanations. One of the most dramatic fringe theories suggests they were not made by solid objects at all, but by a cosmic electrical discharge. Imagine a comet passing terrifyingly close to Earth, its charged tail interacting with our planet's atmosphere like a celestial lightning bolt, striking the ground and blasting out these uniform scars in a single apocalyptic instant. Another, even more speculative idea posits that they are remnants of ancient, advanced energy work, perhaps giant resonators or geological batteries built by a lost civilization, their purpose now utterly obscure. While these concepts stretch the boundaries of mainstream archaeology, they speak to the sheer perplexing nature of the bays, a phenomenon so odd it invites radical rethinking. Today, the mystery is far from cold. Geologists continue to survey the bays with ground-penetrating radar, core sampling, and sophisticated mapping, searching for that one definitive clue. Yet each new piece of data seems to deepen the debate rather than settle it. The very soil and sand that form their rims show a confusing mix of local and non-local materials, and the layers of sediment within them tell a complex story of filling and drying over vast stretches of time. This is why, after over a century of study, the origin of the Carolina Bays remains one of North America's greatest natural enigmas. They are a testament to the fact that some of Earth's most common features can hide its most uncommon secrets, a sprawling question mark written in water and earth that challenges our understanding of history itself. The quiet mystery of the landscape gives way to a storm of debate along the banks of the Savannah River. Here, at a place called the Topper Site, a single archaeologist's shovel has struck not just soil, but the very foundations of American history. For decades, one story dominated our textbooks, a theory known as Clovis first. It held that the first humans to set foot in the Americas were a culture of big game hunters who crossed the Bering Land Bridge from Siberia around 13,000 years ago. They are identified by their distinctive, fluted spear points, exquisitely crafted stone tools found from coast to coast. This narrative was neat, elegant, and widely accepted. Then came Albert Goodyear, in the late 1990s, digging deeper than anyone had thought necessary at Topper. Goodyear and his team began pulling up crude, simple stone tools from layers of earth that, according to initial dating, were far older. Much older, the most shocking claims suggested some artifacts might be 50,000 years old, a date that would completely shatter the Clovis timeline. The centerpiece of this controversial collection is an artifact nicknamed the Topper Chopper. It is not a graceful spear point. It is a rugged, fist-sized piece of chert, a type of stone, with a sharp, durable edge created by striking flakes off one side. To a layperson, it might look like just a rock. To an archaeologist, the pattern of those deliberate strikes tells a story of human intention, a tool made for cutting, scraping, and processing. The controversy, however, lies not in recognizing it as a tool, but in proving when it was made. The dating methods used here are rigorous but complex and hotly contested. Scientists used a technique called optically stimulated luminescence, which measures how long ago buried grains of sand were last exposed to sunlight. The results from these tests pointed to those astonishingly ancient dates. Critics argue fiercely. They suggest these crude stones might be what they call geofacts, rocks broken naturally by geological processes like river tumbling or freeze-thaw cycles, not human hands. They question whether the artifacts were truly in place, undisturbed for millennia, or if natural forces could have moved older stones into younger layers, creating a false archaeological signal. The debate, is a high-stakes clash between a compelling new discovery and a deeply entrenched scientific paradigm. It forces us to ask uncomfortable questions. If humans were here 50,000 years ago, who were they? How did they arrive, since the ice-free corridor through Canada would not have been open? Could they have come by boat, skirting the Pacific coast in a journey of unimaginable daring? The Topper site stands as a battleground of ideas, a place where a simple stone chopper holds the potential to tear up the first chapter of the human story in America and force us to write a new, much longer, and far more mysterious one. The controversy over Topper is not a quiet disagreement. It is a full-scale academic war fought in journals and at conferences. On one side are researchers like Albert Goodyear, who stand by the data. They argue the tools show clear patterns of human craftsmanship, a consistent method of striking stone to create a usable edge, found in a geological layer whose age has been repeatedly tested. To them, dismissing these as just broken rocks ignores the mounting evidence. On the other side are many prominent archaeologists who remain deeply skeptical. They point out that nature is a master stoneworker, too. Rocks crushed under glacial pressure, shattered by lightning, or battered in ancient riverbeds can produce flakes and edges that look deceptively human-made. The burden of proof, they argue, for overturning the Clovis model is extraordinarily high, and a collection of crude stones, no matter how intriguing, is not enough to meet it. This debate is about more than just dating methods. It is about how we define what makes us human in the archaeological record. If the Topper tools are real, the implications are staggering. A date of 50,000 years ago would mean humans were navigating the challenges of the last ice age in South Carolina, while Neanderthals still walked in Europe. It completely rewrites the timeline. How did they get here? The traditional land bridge route would have been blocked by impassable ice sheets. This forces a radical alternative, a coastal migration. Imagine small groups of ancient people, not walking, but paddling. They might have followed the rim of the Pacific, moving from island to island in skin boats or dugout canoes, living off the abundant marine resources, eventually making their way down the coast to the virgin lands of the Americas. This maritime journey would have required remarkable skill and adaptability, painting a picture of our ancestors not just as hardy hunters, but as intrepid explorers of the sea. For South Carolina specifically, such an early presence transforms its place in the human story. It would no longer be a late settled corner of the continent, but potentially one of the first beachheads, a welcoming environment where these pioneering groups could thrive. The rivers and coastal plains, rich with life, would have provided everything needed to sustain a population. This single site on the Savannah River, therefore, is not just a local curiosity. It is a fault line in our understanding of global prehistory. It challenges the story we tell about human resilience, migration, and ingenuity. The stones at Topper, silent and unassuming, hold within them the power to topple a scientific consensus that has stood for generations, reminding us that the deepest chapters of our past are still being uncovered, one contested artifact at a time. While stones whisper of deep time, other mysteries are written in the more recent, but no less confusing, language of colonial ambition. On the windswept shores of Paris Island, South Carolina, history lies in a tangled, contested heap. This is the site of Santa Elena, founded by the Spanish in 1566, a settlement that briefly served as the capital of the vast territory they called La Florida. At its heart stood Fort San Felipe, a wooden bastion meant to project Spanish power and defend against both the French and the native peoples. We know the town was here, but the fort itself has become a ghost in the ground, its exact shape and story maddeningly elusive. Archaeologists have spent decades trying to pin it down, and what they have found is a puzzle box of overlapping histories. Their trowels have uncovered clear evidence of Spanish occupation, the dark lines of moats dug for defense, and the distinct patterns of post holes where massive wooden walls once stood. Yet just as they start to trace one structure, the evidence shifts. The problem is that the English, decades later, built their own forts, Fort Charles and Fort William, directly on top of the same strategic high ground. They reused moats, drove new posts through old post holes, and essentially scrambled the archaeological record like two different blueprints laid over the same page. This makes pinpointing the precise footprint of San Felipe incredibly difficult, like trying to hear one specific voice in a crowded, echoing room. Every trench and feature must be asked, are you Spanish or are you English? The answer matters profoundly because the fort's exact layout is a frozen moment of colonial strategy and anxiety. Its size would tell us about the strength of the garrison. The placement of its corner bastions would reveal how they planned to defend against cannon fire. The location of its gates and internal buildings could speak to daily life and the tense relationship with the surrounding Santa Elena townspeople and the local Escamacu people. Finding its true form would unlock secrets about those early, fragile years of European empire in North America, a time of desperate struggle for survival, not conquest. Each shard of pottery, each rusted nail, and each confused soil stain from Paris Island is a piece of a map leading not to treasure, but to truth, a truth still buried under centuries of borrowed fortifications and shifting sands. While colonial powers built forts to claim the land, a far older and more enigmatic architecture rises from the South Carolina coast, built not from wood or stone, but from the sea itself. North of Charleston, in the quiet marshes and maritime forests, lie the Sioux shell rings. These are not random piles of refuse, but monumental, intentional structures crafted from millions upon millions of oyster, clam, and mussel shells, carefully arranged into vast circular and semicircular formations. Some rings are nearly perfect circles, with walls that stand several feet high and enclose open plazas the size of a modern city block. Others form more complex shapes, like crescents or horseshoes, their curves precise and deliberate. The sheer scale is humbling, requiring a communal effort that spanned generations, a sustained project of gathering, hauling, and placing countless tons of shell. The immediate, logical assumption might be that these were simply ancient trash heaps, the discarded leftovers of countless feasts piled up over centuries. But the evidence on the ground tells a very different, more mysterious story. For one, the shells are not mixed with the kind of everyday debris you would find in a village mitten, the archaeological term for a trash pile. Researchers find a striking lack of broken pottery, animal bones from land mammals, or the scattered remnants of domestic life. Instead, the rings are composed almost purely of shell, and their structure is too orderly, too designed to be accidental. This purity of material points toward a special purpose, something beyond the mundane. So if they were not garbage dumps, what were they? One compelling theory is that they served as ceremonial centers, sacred spaces for gathering, ritual, and social cohesion. The enclosed central plaza would have been a natural amphitheater, a place for storytelling, dances, or spiritual observances led by community leaders. The act of building the ring itself, with each family or clan contributing shells, would have strengthened social bonds and affirmed a shared identity. Another fascinating possibility links these rings to the sky. Some archaeologists have noted that the openings or particular alignments of certain rings correspond to solar events, like the summer or winter solstice sunrise. This suggests they could have functioned as colossal astronomical calendars, their shapes marking the passage of seasons and guiding the timing of harvests, ceremonies, and migrations. They would have been, in essence, a clock and a cathedral built from the bones of the ocean. The builders are traditionally attributed to the Sioux people, who later inhabited the area, but the ring's great age complicates this. Radiocarbon dating reveals some were constructed over 4,000 years ago, in a time archaeologists call the Late Archaic period. This means they predate the known Sui culture by millennia, built by much earlier, unknown groups whose names and stories are lost to time. These anonymous architects looked at the abundant resources of the coast and chose not just to consume them, but to build monuments with them, transforming a simple food source into a permanent symbol. The enduring mystery of the shell rings is not about who ate the oysters, but about the meaning they poured into those empty shells. Were these structures temples, calendars, or the physical embodiment of a community's covenant with the sea and the stars? Each silent, spiraling ring holds that question within its curves, a riddle written in a language of shell that we are still learning how to read. High in the misty forests of the Upstate, the landscape holds its secrets in piles of stone, scattered across the slopes and ridges. From Table Rock State Park to the edges of the Blue Ridge Escarpment are thousands of these stone cairns. At first glance, they might seem unremarkable, simple stacks of rock that could be the work of any farmer clearing a field. And indeed, many are just that, remnants of 19th century land clearing, where stones were piled to make way for crops or pasture. But look closer, and a pattern emerges that hints at something far older and more intentional. Among these historical piles are cairns of a different character, often found in remote, high-elevation locations with sweeping views, places with no logical agricultural purpose. These are not random heaps, but carefully constructed mounds, some forming deliberate lines, circles, or even shapes that align with the horizon. The mystery deepens when you bring a compass and a map. Researchers and amateur archaeologists have documented that specific cairns align with dramatic geographical features. One might point directly at the summit of a distant, prominent mountain. Another could be positioned so that on the morning of the summer solstice, the rising sun crests a particular notch in the ridge, precisely over the center of the stone pile. These are not likely to be coincidences. Such alignments suggest a deep knowledge of the land and the sky, a purposeful marking of places that held significance. But significance for what? The theories are as varied as the stones themselves. Some believe they were built by pre-Columbian hunting groups, perhaps as trail markers through the dense, trackless woods, or as ritual sites to ensure a successful hunt. Others propose they are burial markers, though excavations have rarely uncovered human remains, leaving that idea unproven. There is even speculation, fueled by local lore, that they were built by a lost tribe, a group that vanished from the historical record long before European contact, leaving only these silent stone sentinels as evidence of their passage. The core of the frustration lies in the very simplicity of the cairns. Dating a pile of unworked stone is incredibly difficult. Unlike a shell ring with organic material for carbon dating, or a colonial fort with European artifacts, a cairn offers almost nothing to anchor it in time. Unless a builder accidentally dropped a datable object, like a piece of pottery or a tool, during its construction, the cairn exists in a chronological void. It could be 200 years old, or it could be 2,000. This lack of a timestamp makes it nearly impossible to connect the structures to a known culture. Were they built by the ancestors of the Cherokee people who later inhabited the region, or by a much earlier, unrelated archaic culture whose name we will never know? The stones do not say. This leaves us with a haunting, open-ended enigma. Walking among these cairns is to stand in a place of multiple overlapping histories. You are looking at a pile that could be the work of a Scottish immigrant farmer in 1850, or the sacred marker of an indigenous hunter from 1,000 years before. The two possibilities coexist in the same stack of granite, one story written over the other, blending into a single, untranslatable text. They are reminders that the past is not always neatly layered, that sometimes it converges into a single, stubborn point of mystery. The cairns of the Upstate ask us a silent question, not about who moved these stones, but about why they felt this particular spot, with this particular view of the sun or the mountain, was worthy of a monument in the first place. A single brick can hold a universe of questions. Among South Carolina's grand stone monuments and sprawling shell rings, one of its most perplexing mysteries fits in the palm of your hand. It is known as the Columbia brick, a seemingly ordinary fired clay block with an extraordinary claim etched onto its surface. Discovered in the mid-20th century in Columbia, the brick was brought to light by a local historian who immediately recognized that its markings were anything but random. Scratched into the clay before it was fired are a series of symbols that bear a startling resemblance to ancient scripts from across the Atlantic, specifically early Libyan or Iberian alphabets used over 2,000 years ago. The implication was explosive, suggesting that someone from the ancient Mediterranean world, a Phoenician trader or perhaps a lost Libyan sailor, might have set foot in the heart of South Carolina in antiquity, leaving this cryptic calling card behind. The idea sent immediate shockwaves through circles dedicated to alternative history, offering a tantalizing, physical piece of evidence for pre-Columbian transatlantic contact far from the coastline. The brick, however, did not enter a world of eager acceptance, but one of fierce scholarly scrutiny. Epigraphers, experts in ancient inscriptions, were called upon to decode the symbols. Their analyses split into two opposing camps, creating a stalemate that persists to this day. One group of researchers points to compelling parallels. They argue the sequence of characters matches known letter forms from ancient North African scripts, and that the arrangement suggests a deliberate, grammatical inscription, not idle doodling. If authentic, this brick would be a historical bombshell, concrete proof that old world civilizations had knowledge of, and perhaps trade with, the interior of the American continent centuries before Columbus. The other camp is deeply skeptical, if not dismissive. They counter that the markings are ambiguous, open to interpretation, and could easily be natural fissures in the clay, random scratches, or even a clever modern hoax. They argue that without archaeological context, finding a single, portable object is suspect. A genuine ancient artifact would typically be found among other cultural debris, in a datable layer of soil, not as an isolated item with no provenance. The brick, they say, tells a story anyone wants to hear, which is often the hallmark of a forgery. So why has this enigmatic object never been conclusively proven a fake or validated as real? The answer lies in its frustrating nature as an artifact. It is a single, unprovenanced find. We do not know the exact archaeological layer it came from, so we cannot carbon date the clay or associate it with other materials from a specific time period. The inscription is shallow and worn, making high-resolution analysis difficult. Science thrives on repeatability and context, and the Columbia brick provides neither. It exists in a kind of historical limbo, too intriguing to ignore yet too isolated to verify. It serves as a perfect symbol for the entire field of alternative archaeology, a physical embodiment of the tantalizing gap between a revolutionary idea and the rigid standards of proof required to accept it. The brick sits silently, its message locked in symbols we can almost, but not quite, read, challenging us to wonder if the history we know is merely the fragment that survived, and not the whole astonishing story. But water does more than preserve shells. It can also conceal entire landscapes of stone. Deep in the Blue Ridge Mountains, the clear, cold waters of Lake Juckasee hide a mystery that has intrigued divers for decades. This reservoir was created in the early 1970s, flooding a series of valleys that contained old homesteads, cemeteries, and roads, yet some of the structures found on the lake floor seem to tell a stranger, older story. Divers exploring the murky depths report encountering more than just sunken fence posts and chimney stones. They describe what appear to be deliberate walls, built from flat rocks stacked in orderly courses, and curious circular formations of stone that rest on the silty bottom. In the shifting underwater light, these features look unnaturally arranged, hinting at a human hand long before the lake existed. The most compelling reports come from areas near the mouths of ancient rivers, now submerged, where sonar imagery has revealed large, linear anomalies stretching across the lake bed. These sonar shadows suggest foundations or roadways, patterns that nature rarely creates in straight lines. So what exactly are divers seeing down there? The most straightforward explanation is that these are the remains of the flooded Appalachian communities, the stone foundations of barns, root cellars, and house walls from the 19th and early 20th centuries. This is certainly true for many of the finds, creating an underwater ghost town that is poignant in its own right. However, some of the described structures do not match typical pioneer construction. The stacking techniques and the placement in certain locations, like high points that would have been ridges even before the flood, give seasoned divers pause. This opens the door to a more tantalizing possibility. Could some of these stoneworks be prehistoric, built by indigenous peoples thousands of years ago when the river valleys were dry land? The region has a deep history of Native American settlement, and such structures could represent fishing weirs, ceremonial sites, or seasonal camps that were abandoned and slowly buried by silt, only to be revealed again by modern divers. The challenge, of course, is proving it. Underwater archaeology in a place like Lake Jocassee is extraordinarily difficult. Visibility is often poor, currents can be dangerous, and the cold, deep water limits dive time. Most importantly, without organic material like wood or bone that can be carbon dated, a pile of rocks is nearly impossible to date accurately. A stone wall underwater could be 200 years old or 2,000, and science currently lacks a simple way to tell the difference on site. This leaves us with a hauntingly beautiful enigma. The lake holds its secrets close, allowing just glimpses of shaped stone in the gloom. It presents us with a layered puzzle where a single stacked wall could be the cellar of a moonshiner's cabin from 1930, or it could be the last remnant of a forgotten gathering place from 1,000 years before that. Lake Jocassee does not give answers. It only offers possibilities, a silent, aqueous museum where the exhibits are forever just out of clear focus. A deerskin can carry more than just the memory of a hunt. In 1721, a Catawba leader, likely a man named Napkeh, took a piece of prepared hide and drew upon it a complete geopolitical landscape. This was not art for art's sake. It was a strategic document created for the colonial governor of South Carolina to explain the complex web of alliances and threats in the interior. The map shows rivers snaking across the territory, clusters of dots representing villages of the Catawba and their neighbors, and delicate lines tracing the vital trading paths and war roads that connected the region. It is a stunning example of indigenous cartography, a diplomatic tool drawn from a profoundly different understanding of space and place. But for modern researchers, the true mystery lies not in the trails we recognize, but in the symbols we cannot. Scattered across the hide, amid the familiar notations for towns and rivers, are enigmatic drawings. Some look like strange, multi-lobed flowers or intricate geometric patterns. Others resemble stylized animals or figures that do not match any known 18th century cultural iconography of the Southeast. The most tantalizing interpretations suggest that some of these symbols might not represent living villages at all, but rather ancient places. Specifically, several clusters of small, dome-like shapes have led scholars to ask a thrilling question. Could these be depictions of prehistoric platform mounds or ceremonial earthworks that by 1721 were already ancient ruins? overgrown and forgotten by everyone except the Catawba's own deep historical memory. The Catawba territory was once dotted with such mounds, built by the Mississippian culture centuries earlier. By the colonial period, many were abandoned, their builders long gone, but their physical presence would have still shaped the landscape. If these symbols are indeed maps within the map, they could be recording the locations of these sacred sites, encoding knowledge passed down through generations. This transforms the deerskin from a simple political snapshot into a potential palimpsest, a document where a recent colonial reality is drawn over a much older, spiritual geography. The map's creator was almost certainly not an archaeologist. He was a leader navigating a present-day crisis, yet his choice to include these symbols suggests they held meaning, that they were part of the mental map of his people's homeland. They might have marked places of power, ancestral memory, or traditional gathering spots that, while no longer occupied, still held cultural significance. The tragedy, and the core of the mystery, is that the key to this code has been lost. We can see the symbols, but without the oral tradition that once explained them, their meaning is opaque. This leaves historians and archaeologists with a beautiful, frustrating puzzle. They can take the map and overlay it on the modern landscape, searching for correlations. Does that cluster of dome symbols align with the known location of a Mississippian mound complex? Does that strange geometric pattern correspond to a natural feature, or perhaps a now vanished arrangement of standing stones? Every match is a potential breakthrough, a thread connecting the 18th century Catawba world to a prehistoric past they remembered. The deerskin map is a silent witness to the layers of history that saturate the land. It reminds us that maps are never just about geography. They are about identity, memory, and the stories a people tell about where they come from. This fragile piece of hide challenges us to look beyond the obvious trails and villages, to see the ghostly impressions of a much older world still visible, if only we know how to look for its signs. While maps hold memories and symbols, metal holds history in its very composition. In the late 1800s, near the town of Monk's Corner in Berkeley County, laborers digging a drainage ditch struck something unexpected. Their shovels clinked against not just soil, but metal, pulling up a small collection of crude copper artifacts. There were simple tools, perhaps awls or chisels, and a few ornaments, all shaped from raw, native copper. The discovery itself was curious, but the real mystery lay in where they were found. The workers reported the objects came from a deep layer of blue marl clay, a geological formation that suggested these items were buried not centuries, but millennia ago. This single detail sent a ripple of confusion through what was understood about the ancient Southeast. Copper working, as a deliberate technology of mining, smelting, and shaping metal, was completely unknown among the early indigenous cultures of South Carolina. The advanced metallurgical traditions of Mesoamerica were thousands of miles away, and the famous copper cultures of the Great Lakes region were a staggering 1,000 miles to the north. So how did these copper pieces end up in a Berkeley County ditch? One compelling theory points to vast, ancient trade networks. Imagine a piece of copper mined from the rich deposits around Lake Superior being traded from hand to hand, village to village, over generations. It would travel down the Mississippi River system, then eastward along tributary trails, a prized raw material slowly making its way across the continent. In this scenario, the artifacts are not local products, but treasured imports, their final owners perhaps unaware of the metal's distant origin, valuing it for its rarity and color. Yet another, more radical possibility lingers. Could they represent a brief, localized experiment with metal, perhaps a small group having found a rare deposit of native copper, which occurs in pure metallic form, tried their hand at cold hammering it into simple shapes before the knowledge was lost? This would suggest a flicker of independent technological discovery that never ignited into a full tradition. The frustrating truth is we may never know because the artifacts themselves have vanished. After their initial discovery and a brief mention in a scientific journal, the physical objects disappeared from the record. They were likely misplaced, discarded, or tucked away in a private collection and forgotten. This loss is a profound tragedy for archaeology. Without the actual artifacts, modern scientists cannot perform essential tests. We cannot analyze the copper's chemical signature to match it to a specific mine in the Great Lakes. We cannot examine the tool marks under a microscope to understand the manufacturing technique. We cannot even verify the reported depth of their discovery with certainty. The Berkeley County copper exists now only in a few written descriptions, a ghost of a mystery. It stands as a cautionary tale about the fragility of the past, reminding us that sometimes the most compelling evidence is also the most ephemeral, leaving behind only a tantalizing question hanging in the empty air where a physical object once lay. Stone walls whisper of abandonment along the Ashley River. Here lie the haunting ruins of Dorchester, an ambitious colonial town that simply vanished from the map. Founded in 1697 by a congregation of Congregationalists from Massachusetts, it was later transformed into a bustling Anglican parish and strategic outpost for the South Carolina colony. It boomed for decades, a thriving center with a deep water landing for rice and indigo plantations, a sturdy tabby fort, and a striking brick and tab church with walls 3 feet thick. By the 1780s, however, Dorchester was utterly empty, a ghost town reclaimed by the roots of live oaks. The standard explanations are clear enough. The disruptive violence of the American Revolution swept through the region, and economic patterns shifted away from its location. Yet these factors alone do not fully explain the profound finality of its desertion. Other towns faced war and hardship, yet they were rebuilt. Dorchester was not just damaged, it was completely forsaken, its buildings left to crumble in place with an eerie stillness. Walking among the ruins today, you feel this palpable sense of sudden departure. The tabby walls of St. George's Church still stand tall, their oyster shell concrete enduring where wood has long since rotted. The bell tower, though open to the sky, frames the same view its parishioners once saw. At the town's edge, the fort's earthworks and powder magazine remain, a silent guardian of nothing. This remarkable preservation is part of the mystery. It feels less like a place that slowly died and more like one that was deliberately walked away from, frozen in time. So what compelled an entire community to collectively decide to leave every home, church, and public building behind? Beyond the documented pressures of war and economics, historians speculate about more subtle forces. Was there a devastating, unrecorded outbreak of disease that shattered the community's spirit? Did social tensions between the original Congregationalist founders and the later Anglican majority create an unbearable rift? Some even point to environmental factors, perhaps a shift in the river channel that doomed its port or repeated crop failures that made subsistence impossible. Local folklore, as it often does, adds a layer of spectral speculation, with tales of hauntings and unexplained phenomena that some say drove the last residents away. The most compelling answer, however, may be a confluence of all these pressures, a perfect storm of misfortune that made staying seem far worse than the daunting prospect of starting over elsewhere. Many of Dorchester's former residents are known to have migrated south to found the new settlement of Midway in Georgia, suggesting an organized exodus toward hope rather than a panicked flight from terror. This fact transforms the mystery. Dorchester may not be a story of defeat, but one of deliberate, difficult choice. Its silent tabby walls are not a monument to failure, but to resilience in another form, the resilience to leave everything familiar behind in search of a new beginning. The town stands as a stone question mark, asking us to consider what ultimate threshold a community will cross before it decides that home is no longer the place where its houses stand, but wherever its people can survive together. The silent geometry of shell rings finds a sprawling, linear cousin along the winding banks of the Stono River. Here, the mystery is not one of circles, but of lines, vast and purposeful. Stretching for hundreds of feet along the marshy shoreline are enormous accumulations of oyster shells known as middens. But these are not the small, messy piles of a single feast. They are monumental ridges, some standing several feet high and wide, forming deliberate patterns that snake across the landscape. Unlike the ceremonial plazas of the Sui Rings, the Stono River formations seem to speak a language of pure function, of harvest and engineering on a staggering scale. The most compelling theory is that these linear shell mounds are the remnants of ancient fish weirs, some of the largest and most sophisticated ever built in prehistoric North America. Imagine the process not as simple gathering, but as landscape architecture. Builders would have driven long rows of wooden stakes into the riverbed at low tide, creating a labyrinthine fence. They would then have packed these fences with millions of oyster shells, not as waste, but as ballast and reinforcement. This created a permanent, semi-permeable wall. As the high tide rolled in, fish would swim over these submerged barriers. When the tide receded, the fish would be trapped behind them in shallow pools or channels, making for an incredibly efficient harvest. The shell itself was the perfect building material, readily available, heavy enough to stay put in the current, and its rough surface would help secure the wooden framework. This was not just fishing, it was a form of tidal farming, a way to work with the rhythms of the moon and the sea to guarantee a food supply. The scale of these weirs implies a deep, generational knowledge of hydrology and marine biology. The builders understood exactly where to place these structures to maximize the catch, how to shape them to funnel fish, and how to maintain them against the constant wear of the estuary. This represents a pinnacle of sustainable engineering, a system that provided food for centuries without depleting the resource. So why do these colossal achievements remain so poorly studied? The answer is a mix of accessibility and modern development. Many of the most significant weir sites are located in remote, swampy areas that are difficult and expensive for archaeologists to reach and excavate properly. More pressingly, the rapid growth of the Charleston area has placed these fragile formations directly in the path of dredging, dock construction, and shoreline development. Each one lost is a library of ecological and cultural data erased before it could be read. A comprehensive study could answer profound questions. By analyzing the layers of shell, scientists could reconstruct centuries of climate data and oyster population health. Studying the construction techniques could reveal social organization, how many people worked together, and how knowledge was passed down. Most importantly, these weirs stand as a powerful testament to a different relationship with nature, one of intricate partnership rather than simple domination. They are a silent lesson from the past, written in shell and river mud, about how to live abundantly with a coastline without exhausting it. The silent engineering of the Stono River weirs speaks of a practical, harvest-driven relationship with the land, but other swamp-bound discoveries hint at something more spiritual and far more elusive. Deep in the tidal marshes surrounding Winya Bay, a persistent legend whispers of an object that defies simple explanation, the so-called Winya idol. According to scattered accounts from the 18th and 19th centuries, early settlers and hunters in that remote area stumbled upon a curious stone carving. Descriptions vary, but the core image is consistent: a weathered figure, perhaps depicting a human face or an animal form, crudely shaped from the region's sandstone or limestone. It was not in a museum or a collection, but reportedly just sitting there in the muck, half submerged in the black water or nestled among the cypress knees, as if waiting to be found. The most tantalizing part of the story is what happened next, or rather, what did not happen. After being noted, sketched by a few intrigued individuals, and discussed in a handful of local newspaper items, the idol vanished. It was never properly documented by archaeologists, never placed in a university collection. It simply slipped back into the legend from which it emerged, leaving behind only a trail of questions. This kind of mystery sits in a frustrating gray area between history and folklore. The early newspaper clippings and settler diaries give it a thin veneer of credibility, a footprint in the written record. Yet without the physical artifact to examine, we are left trying to decipher shadows. So what might this object have actually been, if it existed at all? One compelling possibility is that it was a genuine pre-Columbian sculpture. The indigenous cultures of the Southeast, particularly the Mississippian people, did create stone effigies, though they are more commonly found further inland. A lone statue, perhaps depicting a clan symbol or a spiritual guardian, could have been moved or traded to the coast, eventually abandoned and reclaimed by the swamp. Alternatively, nature itself is a master sculptor. A piece of sandstone, eroded for centuries by wind and acidic water, can often form bizarre shapes that trick the human eye into seeing faces or figures, a phenomenon known as pareidolia. A particularly suggestive rock, found in the right eerie setting, could easily have sparked the legend of an idol. There is even a chance it was a meteorite, as iron-nickel space rocks often develop strange, pitted surfaces that can look unnaturally worked. The true power of the Winya idol legend, however, is not in solving what it was, but in understanding what it represents. This story highlights the fragile, often messy intersection of material evidence and collective memory. An object is found, it generates stories and speculation, and then it disappears. What remains is not an artifact, but a myth, a placeholder in the historical record for a possibility. It becomes a cultural reflection, revealing less about the past and more about the people who told the tale. For early European settlers, encountering such a strange object in a landscape they viewed as untamed and empty would have been deeply unsettling. It was a tangible reminder that they were not the first people here, that the land had a deeper, unknown history. The idol, whether real or not, became a symbol of that unsettling mystery. Its loss is a tragedy for archaeology, but its persistence in folklore is a testament to the human need to explain the unexplained, to populate the silent spaces of history with stories. The swamp may have swallowed the object, but it could not swallow the intrigue it inspired. The swamp's legends of lost idols give way to a more tangible, yet equally elusive, mystery along the banks of one of the state's great rivers. In the fertile floodplain of the Santee River, history speaks in whispers of shaped earth. Scattered reports from early surveyors, antiquarians, and local families describe low, circular earthen mounds rising gently from the flat landscape. Unlike the grand, pyramidal platform mounds of Mississippi or Georgia, these were subtle features, perhaps only a few feet high and dozens of feet across, often hidden beneath a canopy of mature trees and thick undergrowth. Their very modesty is part of the puzzle. Were these the final resting places of important individuals, burial mounds covering log-lined tombs? Or were they the foundations for ceremonial buildings or chiefly homes, platform mounds that elevated a sacred space above the seasonal floods of the Santee? A third, more practical possibility exists, that they were simply natural formations, ancient dunes or sediment deposits left by the river's meandering path over millennia. The tragic core of this mystery, however, is that we may never get the chance to find out. The history of the Santee River region is a history of profound transformation, one that has likely erased these subtle fingerprints of the past. For over 2 centuries, this area was the epicenter of the low-country rice empire. Vast plantations reshaped the hydrology of the entire region, with a network of dams, canals, and floodgates called rice trunks controlling the flow of water across thousands of acres. The construction of these massive engineering projects involved moving enormous amounts of earth. It is heartbreakingly plausible that plantation workers, digging a new irrigation canal or building a levee, unknowingly plowed straight through one of these ancient mounds, scattering its contents and leveling its form, all without a single record being made. Later, in the 19th and 20th centuries, logging operations swept through the river's bottomland hardwood forests. The heavy machinery and skid trails used to remove massive cypress and pine trees would have further disturbed the soft soil, potentially obliterating any remaining surface evidence. This creates a unique and haunting kind of archaeological mystery. For most sites, the question is, what does this structure mean? For the Santee mounds, the primary question has become, did they ever exist at all? The evidence is tantalizingly circumstantial. The Santee River was a major artery of travel and trade for indigenous peoples for thousands of years. It would be statistically unusual for such a vital corridor to lack the kinds of ceremonial or burial sites found along every other major river system in the southeast. The early reports, though vague, come from multiple independent sources over a span of decades, describing similar features in similar locations. This suggests they were observing something real, not just a shared folktale. Yet, without a single professionally excavated mound to serve as a reference point, these reports remain in the realm of historical anecdote. Modern archaeological surveys are hampered by the very landscape. Thick vegetation, private property boundaries, and the altered, flooded terrain make systematic ground search incredibly difficult. A low earthen mound, after centuries of plowing and erosion, can become virtually indistinguishable from the surrounding ground, visible only as a slight rise on specialized aerial laser surveys, if it is visible at all. So we are left with a ghost of a possibility. The Santee mounds represent a profound lesson in the fragility of the historical record. They remind us that some mysteries are not about interpreting what we have found, but about mourning what we have lost before we even knew to look. They underscore how the march of agriculture and industry can quietly smooth over the sacred geography of an earlier world, leaving behind only a faint, unresolved echo in old journals and local memory, a whisper that something meaningful once rose from this earth. The whispers of lost earthworks along the Santee are echoed by strange lines etched into the sandy soil of the state's interior. In the Sandhills region, near the sprawling military base now known as Fort Liberty, a different kind of terrestrial puzzle emerges. For generations, locals and a handful of curious researchers have pointed to faint, linear depressions that scar the landscape. These are not natural creek beds or animal trails, but long, remarkably straight features that run for surprising distances. They resemble canals, shallow trenches that seem too orderly, too purposeful, to be the work of random erosion. The immediate question they pose is deceptively simple, yet the answer is buried under layers of time and competing histories. Who dug these channels, and for what possible purpose? The most tantalizing and controversial theory is that they are pre-Columbian engineering projects. The Sandhills soil is notoriously porous and dry, a challenging environment for agriculture. An ancient culture with a deep understanding of their environment might have excavated these canals as a form of water management. They could have been designed to capture and redirect scarce rainfall, to funnel water from seasonal streams to garden plots, or perhaps to drain swampy areas for settlement. This would represent a sophisticated adaptation to a specific ecosystem, a testament to an indigenous knowledge system that viewed the land not as an obstacle, but as a partner to be shaped and understood. The scale of such an undertaking would imply a coordinated community effort, a society invested in altering its landscape for long-term survival. A more recent and historically documented explanation points to colonial and antebellum industry. The longleaf pine forests of the Sandhills were a prime location for the naval stores industry, the harvesting of pine sap to make tar, pitch, and turpentine. This process, active from the 18th through the early 20th centuries, required an extensive network of access roads and drainage ditches. Workers would blaze trails and dig trenches to move equipment and to manage water around their operation sites. These utilitarian features, often straight and linear for efficiency, could easily be mistaken for ancient canals after a century of abandonment and overgrowth. Similarly, they could be remnants of later agricultural drainage projects from the 19th century, attempts by farmers to make the sandy soil more productive by controlling its water flow. This is where the mystery becomes exceptionally difficult to unravel. The physical evidence on the ground is ambiguous. A straight depression in sandy soil holds no datable artifacts within its walls. Without finding a stone tool, a piece of pottery, or a colonial era nail actually embedded in the trench lining, assigning an age is nearly impossible. The features themselves are subtle, often visible only on aerial photographs or under specific light conditions, making detailed archaeological study a challenge. Furthermore, the area's modern history as a major military installation adds another layer of complication. The land has been extensively used for training maneuvers for decades, with digging, trenching, and vehicle traffic that could either have obscured the original features or created new ones that mimic the old. So we are left with a landscape palimpsest of the highest order. A single straight line in the sand could be the ghost of a 1,000-year-old indigenous irrigation ditch, a 200-year-old turpentine collector's path, a 100-year-old farm drainage line, or a 50-year-old military practice trench. Each possibility tells a valid but completely different story about human interaction with this patch of earth. The Fort Liberty Canal claims force us to confront the limits of surface archaeology. Some mysteries are not locked away in deep stratigraphy, but are written plainly on the surface in a language we have forgotten how to read, their meaning erased not by burial, but by too many subsequent authors writing over the same page. They stand as a quiet reminder that the past is not always buried beneath our feet. Sometimes it is stretched out right in front of us, clear as day and just as open to interpretation. Stone gives way to stone, but some are shaped with a purpose that spans oceans. In the tidal shallows of Battery Creek, near the historic entrance to Port Royal Sound, the mud has surrendered objects that seem out of place. These are not simple river rocks, but heavy, hand-cut stone blocks, each with a single, clean hole drilled straight through its center. Their design is instantly recognizable to maritime historians. They are dead ringers for ancient stone anchors, the kind used for centuries by Mediterranean seafarers, from the Greeks to the Phoenicians. To find such objects in South Carolina waters is to stumble upon a mystery that floats between two very different histories. The logical, official explanation is a practical one from the age of sail. Throughout the 18th and 19th centuries, Port Royal Sound was a bustling harbor. Sailing ships, especially those arriving without full cargo, needed weight in their holds for stability, a practice called carrying ballast. Stones were the perfect, cheap solution, quarried in one port and dumped overboard in another. Similarly, a stone with a hole could be a simple mooring weight, dropped over the side of a small boat to hold it in place temporarily. In this light, the Battery Creek stones are maritime litter, the discarded tools of a busy colonial and antebellum port. Their Mediterranean appearance is just a coincidence of simple, functional design. But the design itself is what fuels a far more tantalizing line of thought. When you place photographs of the Battery Creek stones next to known ancient anchors from the Mediterranean, the similarities are uncanny. The size, the proportion, the method of drilling the central hole all align with techniques used 2,000 years ago. This sparks an irresistible question. Could these stones be exactly what they look like, genuine ancient anchors, lost by a vessel from the old world that ventured here long before the established timeline of exploration? The possibility, however remote, points to the Phoenicians, the legendary seafaring traders from the coast of modern-day Lebanon. 2,500 years ago, their ships were the most advanced in the world, sailing throughout the Mediterranean and down the Atlantic coast of Africa. Some fragmentary classical texts and controversial maps have led a few scholars to speculate they may have crossed the Atlantic. If a Phoenician vessel, whether by storm or by daring exploration, had entered Port Royal Sound, its crew would have needed to anchor. A lost or cut anchor stone would be one of the few pieces of physical evidence that could survive millennia in the preserving mud. Proving such a theory, however, runs into the same brick wall as the Columbia brick. A stone anchor is an artifact nearly impossible to date directly. You cannot carbon date granite. Its age is determined by its archaeological context, what is found around it or embedded in the hole. If it is recovered from a layer of sediment that also contains 18th century pottery shards, it is likely 18th century. If it is found in isolation, its age remains a guess. The stones from Battery Creek were not found in a controlled archaeological dig. They were discovered by fishermen and dredging operations, their original context forever lost. This leaves us with a classic standoff between Occam's razor and romantic possibility. The simplest explanation is almost certainly correct. They are ballast stones from known historical periods. Yet the human mind is drawn to patterns and echoes, and the echo here is a profound one. It connects the quiet creek in South Carolina to the wine-dark sea of Homeric epic, to the voyages of people who navigated by the stars and traded in purple dye and tin. Whether they are 19th century ballast or a phantom from antiquity, the Battery Creek stones serve as a powerful symbol. They are a tangible link to the fundamental human act of voyage, of throwing a weighted line into unknown waters, hoping it will hold fast against the current. They remind us that every shore has been a destination for someone, and sometimes the most ordinary object can anchor an extraordinary story. High in a secluded upstate cavern, the rock wall itself becomes a canvas for the inexplicable. Here, sheltered from direct sunlight, but not from the creeping damp, are faded pictographs, paintings made with mineral pigments that local tradition attributes to the Cherokee people. The images are haunting, a gallery of red and black figures, handprints, and swirling symbols that seem to pulse with a silent energy. While some motifs are familiar, echoing patterns found on historic Cherokee pottery or in recorded myths, others stand starkly apart. There are strange, geometric grids that look like celestial maps, and abstract animal forms that do not resemble the deer, bear, or turkey commonly depicted in known Cherokee art. This dissonance creates the core of the mystery. If not the Cherokee, whose hand drew these visions in the dark, the most compelling possibility is that the Cherokee were not the original artists, but the inheritors and interpreters of a much older sacred space. The caves could have been ritual sites for the Mississippian culture, the mound-building society that dominated the Southeast for centuries before its decline around 500 years ago. The Mississippians had a rich symbolic language, full of celestial beings, mythological creatures, and complex iconography related to their cosmology. Some of the unexplained grids and symbols in the caves bear an uncanny, though not exact, resemblance to motifs found on Mississippian copper plates and shell engravings from distant sites. This suggests the paintings might be a palimpsest, with Cherokee artists adding their own stories over the top of ancient, half-understood images, a practice of spiritual continuity that respected the power of the place even as the original meaning faded. Alternatively, the paintings might be purely Cherokee, but record experiences that fall outside everyday life. Could these cryptic grids be star charts, mapping the position of constellations, or recording a rare astronomical event like a supernova or comet that blazed across the sky generations ago? The caves, with their controlled darkness and stillness, are perfect observatories, or perhaps the more abstract, swirling forms are not meant to represent the physical world at all, but the non-physical realm of dreams, visions, or trance states induced by ritual. They could be maps of the spirit world, drawn by shamans to document journeys taken for healing or guidance. In this light, the paintings are not puzzles to be decoded, but profound expressions of an interior landscape, forever private to the individuals who created them. The greatest enemy of this mystery, however, is the humid southern air itself. Unlike the dry deserts of the American Southwest, where pictographs can last for millennia, the damp climate of the Appalachian caves is a relentless eraser. Moisture seeps through the limestone, causing pigments to bleed, flake, and fade. This environmental assault makes using scientific dating methods extraordinarily difficult. Radiocarbon dating requires organic material, but if the paint was made purely from inorganic minerals, that option vanishes. Even if plant-based binders were used, the constant moisture likely leached them away long ago. Scholars are left to make stylistic comparisons, a method full of uncertainty. A painting that looks Mississippian might be a Cherokee imitation made centuries later, or a genuine relic from 1,000 years before. Without a reliable timestamp, the paintings float in a frustrating chronological void, their age as mysterious as their meaning. This leaves us with a gallery of ghosts. We stand before these walls with modern eyes, trying to read a language for which we have no dictionary, a poetry composed in a dialect lost to time. The figures neither confirm nor deny our theories. They simply persist. They remind us that history is not only written on parchment or carved in stone, but also painted in fleeting mineral hues on a cave wall, a fragile and fading testament to the human need to make a mark, to say, we were here, we saw, we wondered. The silence of the cave is not empty. It is filled with the echo of that wonder, a question painted in ochre and charcoal that the damp air has softened but cannot completely silence. Charleston Harbor holds a different kind of maritime ghost story, one not of anchors but of dragon-prowed ships. A persistent fringe theory insists that Viking explorers, centuries before Columbus, sailed past the palmetto-lined shores and into this very harbor. The idea is fueled by a cocktail of romantic legend and scattered, enigmatic finds. Proponents sometimes reference the infamous Kensington runestone from Minnesota, a contested slab with runic writing, suggesting similar Norse contact could have reached the southeast. They point to occasional discoveries of metal objects with interlaced patterns vaguely reminiscent of Norse art, or to old local tales of fair-haired, blue-eyed natives that early colonists recorded, interpreting them as evidence of pre-Columbian mixing. These fragments, when woven together outside of academic scrutiny, create a seductive narrative of bold Norsemen venturing far from their known routes in Newfoundland, navigating down the Atlantic coast to the heart of the Lowcountry. The overwhelming consensus of historians and archaeologists, however, leaves this theory without a seaworthy hull. Let us examine the evidence critically. First, the Kensington runestone itself is widely considered by linguists and runologists to be a 19th century hoax, its runes and language anachronistic. Basing a Southern theory on a disputed Midwestern artifact is a shaky foundation. Second, those alleged Norse-style artifacts, when subjected to professional analysis, consistently turn out to be something else. A piece of iron with a woven design is far more likely to be a colonial-era tool fragment or a piece of decorative hardware from a much later period. The stylistic similarities are superficial and ignore the vast span of time and geography between 10th century Scandinavia and 18th century Carolina. As for the colonial accounts of light-skinned indigenous people, modern genetics provides a clear answer. These traits can be explained by natural variation within Native American populations, or more likely, by very early post-contact mixing with European fishermen and traders who were operating off the coast well before permanent settlements were established, leaving no grand archaeological trail, but certainly leaving a genetic one. So why does the vanished Viking theory persist with such vigor? Its endurance speaks less to history and more to the powerful allure of a certain kind of story. The image of Vikings here taps into deep-seated myths of exploration and discovery. It makes the familiar landscape feel epic, connecting a southern city to the grand, sweeping sagas of the North Atlantic. It offers a simpler, more dramatic origin point, a clean narrative of first contact that predates the complex and often tragic history of the colonial era. In a way, the theory is a cultural artifact itself, a modern legend that fills a human need for connection to a romanticized, adventurous past. Charleston Harbor, for all its documented history of pirates, plantations, and naval battles, becomes even more mysterious when we imagine the shadow of a longship against a Carolina sunrise, a ghost that exists not in the soil, but in our enduring desire for the world to hold older, wilder secrets than the record can prove. The romance of vanished ships gives way to a stillness measured in millennia. Deep in the swamp, Congary National Park is a sanctuary of towering hardwoods and silent blackwater, a place where time feels both immediate and impossibly deep. Here, among the roots of living giants, lie the remains of their ancestors, transformed to stone. Petrified wood is common in the park, a beautiful result of natural chemistry where fallen trees, buried in mineral-rich sediment, have their organic cells slowly replaced by silica over millions of years. They emerge as glittering, colorful fossils, perfect records of ancient forests, yet within this expected wonder, a subtle anomaly nags at researchers. It is not the presence of petrified wood, but the peculiarity of its arrangement and condition in certain spots. In a wilderness where nature is the undisputed artist, a few of these stone logs whisper of a possible co-author. The question is deceptively simple, yet maddeningly difficult to answer. Could some of these petrified logs have been moved, shaped, or utilized by people in the distant past? The line between a natural oddity and a cultural artifact becomes treacherously thin in the swamp's complex environment. Consider a heavy, 10-foot-long petrified log found resting perfectly across two others, forming a stable, level platform. Is it a chance result of floodwaters and tree falls over centuries, or was it deliberately placed to create a dry work surface or a ceremonial bench? Another log might exhibit a series of deep, parallel grooves along its length. Geologists would first attribute this to natural weathering, perhaps the grinding action of rocks in an ancient river channel. But to an archaeologist's eye, those grooves can bear an uncanny resemblance to striations left by the process of shaping wood with stone tools, a technique used for millennia to make dug-out canoes or planks. This is the core of the blur. The very processes that create petrified wood, burial under sediment, and mineral saturation are the same processes that erase the delicate evidence of human activity. A sharp, tool-made cut on fresh wood is obvious. On a piece of petrified wood that has been tumbled in floods, scoured by sand, and chemically altered for ages, that same cut becomes weathered, rounded, and ambiguous. It transforms from a clear signature into a suggestion. Furthermore, the park's ecosystem actively conspires against clarity. Major floods, which happen frequently, can move incredibly heavy objects. The power of water laden with silt and debris can slide stone logs into positions that look intentionally arranged. Root growth from living trees can slowly push and crack petrified wood, creating fractures that look like deliberate breaks. The swamp is a restless, living gallery, constantly curating its own exhibits. So why even entertain the idea of human interaction? The logic stems from basic human behavior and the park's known history. The Kungari floodplain has been a resource-rich magnet for people for over 10,000 years. Indigenous groups hunted, fished, and gathered here for millennia. Petrified wood, with its exceptional hardness and sharp, conchoidal fracture, would have been a superior material for tool-making compared to ordinary river stone. A savvy artisan might have sought out these durable fossils to craft scrapers, blades, or hammerstones. There is also the spiritual dimension. For cultures that saw the world as deeply animate, a tree turned to stone would have been a powerful object, a literal merging of the living forest realm with the eternal mineral world. Such an object might have been collected, revered, or placed in a significant location, its inherent wonder amplified by ritual. To date, no definitive proof has emerged. No petrified wood artifact has been found in a clear archaeological context, like within a hearth or burial mound in the park. The mystery persists in the realm of compelling possibility, a testament to the challenges of reading history in a landscape that never stops writing over itself. Walking past a sun-bleached stone log in the Kungari, you are left to wonder. Are you looking at a purely geological masterpiece, a fossilized tree that fell when early humans were first crossing into the Americas? Or are you looking at a piece of that ancient world that was found, valued, and perhaps even used by those very people, a silent tool or totem that has outlasted every hand that may have ever held it? In this swamp, the line between a natural wonder and a human relic is as faint and shimmering as heat haze on the water. Desire can shape what we see in the dirt. In the 1800s, a story swept through South Carolina that seemed to offer the ultimate proof of ancient transatlantic contact. Newspapers excitedly reported that a farmer, while plowing his field in Beaufort County, had unearthed a small cache of ancient coins. Not just any coins, but Roman coins, specifically from the era of Emperor Constantine the Great, who ruled in the 4th century. The implication was explosive, a physical, metallic link between the Roman Empire and the Carolina Lowcountry, suggesting a legionnaire's lost purse or a trader's hidden stash 1,000 years before Columbus. For a moment, it felt like history had been rewritten in a single furrow. The brief sensation, however, collapsed under the weight of sober scrutiny. When experts and curious scholars finally examined the reports and sought out the actual objects, the story began to unravel. The most likely explanation is one of simple, earnest misidentification. Spanish colonial silver, particularly the ubiquitous 8 real pieces known as pieces of 8, were common finds in coastal South Carolina, a region deeply entwined with Spanish exploration and trade in the 16th and 17th centuries. These coins, worn smooth by centuries in the soil, often featured a cross on one side and a complex coat of arms on the other. To an untrained, hopeful eye, a worn Spanish shield could be mistaken for the imagery on a Roman follies, and a cross could easily be seen as a Christian symbol from Constantine's time. The excitement of the find, combined with a powerful cultural desire to connect the new world to the grand narratives of the old, created a perfect lens for misinterpretation. There is also the possibility of a deliberate prank. The 19th century was a golden age for hoaxes, from the Cardiff giant to the Piltdown man, where creating a sensation could bring fame, profit, or simply amusement. A local joker planting a few old foreign coins and discovering them would have guaranteed a thrilling story and seen his name in the papers. Whether a mistake or a mischief, the Beaufort County coin episode is far more than a historical footnote. It serves as a masterclass in how our wants influence our discoveries. This was a period of intense national identity formation, a time when Americans were eager to prove their land had a classical pedigree to rival Europe's. Finding Roman artifacts would have bestowed an instant, glorious antiquity, connecting a young nation directly to the fountainhead of Western civilization. This mania, as it's been called, created a filter through which any unusual find was immediately viewed as potential proof of Phoenicians, Romans, or lost tribes. The coins teach us that archaeology is not just about what is buried, but about the mindset of the people doing the digging. It highlights the critical importance of provenance, of documenting exactly where and how an object is found, and of subjecting extraordinary claims to relentless, skeptical analysis. The quiet field in Beaufort County likely held nothing more extraordinary than a dropped Spanish reel, but for a fleeting moment, it held the shimmering, illusory promise of empire. The soil of South Carolina holds more than artifacts. It holds the echoes of entire peoples whose origins have faded into legend. In the remote hills and isolated communities along the state's northwestern edges, a different kind of mystery took root, one written not in stone but in bloodlines and family stories. This is the enduring enigma of the Melungeon people. While their heartland lies in the Appalachian ridges of Tennessee and Virginia, their presence and influence certainly touched the Carolinas, adding another layer of profound mystery to the region's human tapestry. For centuries, these communities, often described as tri-racial isolates, existed in a shadowy space outside the rigid racial categories of American society. Their families displayed a bewildering mix of features, with dark hair and olive skin that neighbors could not easily classify as solely European, African, or Native American. This visible difference immediately spawned a whirlwind of origin myths, each more fantastic than the last. Were they the descendants of Portuguese explorers, shipwrecked along the coast centuries before Jamestown, who fled inland and intermarried? Could they be remnants of Ottoman Turks or Moors, perhaps abandoned sailors from the Spanish fleet? Some legends even whispered of lost Carthaginian voyagers or survivors from the lost English colony of Roanoke. These stories were not just idle speculation, they were vital survival narratives in a world where being categorized as black could mean enslavement, and being Indian could mean displacement. Claiming a mysterious, exotic old world origin was a way to assert a free, white identity, a fragile shield against a hostile world. For generations, this cloak of legend was all they had, as official records either ignored them or listed them with frustrating vagueness as free persons of color, a label that buried their unique story. Then came modern genetics, promising finally to cut through the folklore with hard data. DNA studies over the past 2 decades have indeed illuminated much of the darkness. The genetic portrait of Melungeon ancestry is now clearly a complex blend, primarily from 3 sources. Sub-Saharan African ancestry is consistently present, often tracing back to individuals brought to America in the 17th century. Western European ancestry, overwhelmingly from the British Isles, forms another major component, and crucially, a distinct and significant amount of Native American ancestry, specifically from populations in the southeastern United States, is confirmed. This tripartite genetic foundation validates the core of their oral history, that they are a people born from early unions between free or indentured Europeans, free Africans, and indigenous Americans, likely in the volatile crucible of the 17th century Virginia and Carolina frontiers. So the mystery is solved, then, far from it. Genetics can tell us the what, but it struggles with the when, the how, and most importantly, the who. The tests reveal broad ancestral components, but they cannot name the specific individuals whose unions founded these communities. They cannot tell us the stories of those first encounters, whether they were alliances of love, convenience, or mutual survival on the edge of the wilderness. The historical record remains stubbornly, painfully thin. Census takers often used broad, dismissive labels. Family Bibles were lost to fire or flood. The deliberate obscurity that once protected them now hinders our understanding. This leaves profound gaps. Which specific native nations contributed to their lineage? Were the European ancestors always English, or could there be, as the legends insist, a minor but real thread from Portuguese or Mediterranean sailors lost in the early colonial chaos? The genetics suggests the mixing happened very early, in the 1600s, but the precise social mechanics of it all are lost. The story of the Melungeons, therefore, is a living mystery of identity. It is a testament to the ancient, hidden migration paths not across oceans, but into the secluded hills and hollows of the American backcountry. It reminds us that history is not just about empires and battles, but about small groups of people making families and communities in the shadows, their true origins becoming a story they told each other to remember who they were, and a puzzle we are still piecing together today. The same ocean that hides stone anchors also conceals entire lost worlds. Off the coast of South Carolina, the gentle slope of the continental shelf stretches for miles beneath the waves, a submerged landscape that was once a thriving, sunlit plain. During the peak of the last ice age, roughly 20,000 years ago, global sea levels were over 400 feet lower than they are today. What is now a dark seafloor was then a vast, exposed coastal region, crisscrossed by rivers, dotted with freshwater springs, and covered in forests and savannas. This was not a barren wasteland, but a rich, habitable territory, almost certainly home to generations of Paleo-Indian peoples. Their entire world, every camp, every trail, every sacred site, now lies silently beneath the Atlantic, preserved in the deep silt and sand. This is perhaps the state's greatest and most profound archaeological mystery, one that exists almost entirely in the realm of potential. What treasures are buried down there? The possibilities are staggering. We could find the foundations of seasonal hunting camps, marked by stone tools and the charcoal of ancient hearths. We might discover the bones of mammoths or giant ground sloths, with spear points still lodged in the ribs, telling the story of a hunt on a plain that is now 60 meters underwater. Most tantalizing of all could be the discovery of organic materials that never survive on land, things like wooden tools, woven fibers, or even artwork on bone or ivory, preserved in the oxygen-poor mud of the seafloor. A single such find could illuminate the daily lives and spiritual beliefs of these first coastal inhabitants with a clarity land archaeology can rarely provide. This is not science fiction. It is the cutting edge of a new discipline called underwater prehistoric archaeology. Researchers are using advanced technology to map these drowned landscapes. Multi-beam sonar creates detailed, three-dimensional images of the seabed, revealing the ghostly outlines of ancient river channels, sand dunes, and even potential sinkholes that would have attracted animals and humans. Sub-bottom profilers send sound pulses into the layers of sediment, acting like an ultrasound for the ocean floor to detect buried objects or features. The challenge, of course, is monumental. The search area is immense, and excavation under open ocean conditions is incredibly difficult and expensive. A storm can shut down operations for weeks, and visibility on the dark bottom is often near zero, requiring remote-operated vehicles and sophisticated sampling tools. Yet the potential reward is a complete rewriting of early American history. If we can find and study these submerged sites, we would gain an unprecedented window into how the first people adapted to a changing climate. As the glaciers melted and the seas rose, these communities would have been forced to constantly retreat, watching their homeland slowly vanish beneath the waves. Their stories are literally the stories of a drowning world. Every shell midden, every stone tool cluster on that sunken plain is a time capsule from that era of dramatic change. This mystery reminds us that history is not fixed. It is fluid, quite literally shaped by the rising and falling of the seas. The most important chapters of the human story in South Carolina may not be buried in a riverbank or hidden in a cave, but lying in the silent, eternal darkness offshore, waiting for the light of a submersible to reveal them. History can scream from the pages of a document, yet whisper almost nothing from the ground. One of the most violent and transformative events in colonial South Carolina was the Yamasee War of 1715, a massive, coordinated uprising of Native American nations against the expanding settlement. It was a year of fire and terror, with raids destroying plantations, besieging towns, and pushing the colony to the very brink of collapse. The written accounts from survivors and officials are filled with vivid, horrifying detail. They describe specific battles at places like the Pocatello Go Town, the desperate defense of Fort Moore, and the bloody ambush along the Combahee River. These are not vague legends. They are recorded events with names, dates, and maps. And yet, when archaeologists go looking for these battlefields, they often find a profound and puzzling silence. The ground where history says cataclysm occurred frequently yields little more than quiet dirt. This is a mystery defined not by what is present, but by what is absent. How does a war that nearly erased a colony seemingly erase itself from the earth? The answer lies in understanding the very nature of this conflict and the fragile materials it was fought with. The Yamasee War was not a European-style war of set-piece battles between lines of infantry. It was a brutal guerrilla campaign, a war of sudden, devastating raids and swift, melting retreats. Major engagements were often over in hours, not days. The combatants on the Native American side traveled light, using weapons and tools of wood, bone, and stone that, if broken or lost, blend perfectly into the natural background of the Carolina soil. A stone arrowhead or a lead musket ball might be the only durable artifact from such a clash, and finding a single lead ball in a forest or a swamp is like finding one specific needle in a million identical haystacks. There were no grand fortifications built to be besieged, only temporary defensive works thrown up in haste. A colonial militia might dig a shallow trench or pile some logs, features that would be erased by a single season of rain and root growth. The battles left scars on the people and the polity, not necessarily on the landscape. Furthermore, the war targeted economic infrastructure. Plantations were burned to the ground. But what does a burned 17th or early 18th century plantation leave behind? The buildings were almost entirely made of wood. A fierce fire reduces wood to ash, and ash dissolves into the earth within a few years. All that might remain is a faint stain in the soil, a subtle layer of charcoal, and perhaps a handful of nails that fell through the floorboards. Without a stone chimney or foundation, which many early farms lacked, the footprint of a home vanishes completely. The land itself then completes the erasure. In the humid, fertile South, nature is a voracious recycler. Forests regrow with astonishing speed, floodplains silt over. Pine needles and leaf litter build new soil. A field that was a scene of conflict in 1715 could be a mature hardwood forest by 1750, every trace of the event buried under feet of organic material. This rapid reclamation means that even if artifacts are there, they are buried deep, hidden far below the plow zone that typically reveals later historical sites. This creates a frustrating reliance on the written word. Historians must piece together the geography of the war from colonial reports that use landmarks which no longer exist or have names that have changed. The battle occurred at the fork of the creek near the old Indian Path, is a clear description to someone in 1715, but a maddening puzzle for an archaeologist today. The silence is so complete that it forces us to reconsider what evidence even looks like. Perhaps we have been looking for the wrong things, expecting the debris of a European war instead of the ephemeral signature of a frontier raid. The mystery of the Yamasee War's missing archaeology is a haunting lesson in impermanence. It reminds us that some of history's loudest moments are conducted with the most perishable of instruments, leaving behind echoes in documents, but only ghosts in the ground. It challenges us to listen to those echoes more carefully, to read the land not for what it shows, but for what it has chosen, through fire and forest, to quietly absorb and hide. The silence of old battlefields is now being challenged by the hum of new machines. These ancient riddles of South Carolina are no longer confined to dusty archives and fading folklore. They are entering a new era of investigation powered by technologies that see through soil, water, and time itself. This is the future of the state's deepest mysteries, and it is happening right now. At the forefront is LiDAR, a tool that uses laser pulses from aircraft to strip away the modern forest canopy, revealing the bare earth beneath. In the dense woodlands of the Upstate, researchers are flying LiDAR missions over areas known for stone cairns. The hope is that this digital X-ray vision will reveal patterns invisible from the ground, showing if those isolated rock piles are actually part of larger, organized alignments or ceremonial landscapes, finally mapping the ghostly geometry left by unknown builders. Similarly, ground-penetrating radar is sending pulses into the earth at places like the shell rings and suspected mound sites. This technology acts like a sonogram for the soil, creating images of buried features without ever lifting a shovel. It can detect the subtle differences in density that might indicate a filled-in post hole from Fort San Felipe, the outline of a prehistoric house floor beneath a shell ring, or the compacted layers of a ceremonial platform now flattened by centuries of plowing. Underwater, the search is equally high-tech. Marine archaeologists are using advanced multi-beam sonar and sub-bottom profilers to map the drowned prehistoric landscape of the continental shelf with incredible detail. These tools are not just looking for shipwrecks, they are charting ancient river channels and terraces that would have been ideal locations for Paleo-Indian camps, creating a target list for future dives with robotic submersibles. In the laboratory, DNA analysis is revolutionizing our understanding of human stories. Studies on ancient skeletal remains, when they can be found and studied with tribal consultation and consent, can trace migrations and connections between populations across millennia. This science could one day help clarify the origins of the materials in the Berkeley County copper, or trace the lineage of the people who built the earliest shell rings. Even the Carolina bays are getting a fresh look. New high-resolution topographic surveys and coring projects are analyzing the micro-layers of sediment within each bay, searching for a definitive environmental signature, perhaps a layer of extraterrestrial dust or a specific mineral pattern that could finally settle the debate between a cosmic impact and an earthly process. These are not dead mysteries on a museum shelf. They are active, breathing investigations. Every satellite pass, every radar scan, every genetic sequence adds another piece to a puzzle that spans thousands of years. The next great discovery in South Carolina might not come from a lone farmer's plow. It may arrive as a pixelated anomaly on a LiDAR map, a strange genetic marker in an ancient tooth, or a sonar shadow on the deep seafloor. The past is not finished speaking. It is simply waiting for us to develop the right tools to listen. From the cosmic scars of the Carolina bays to the silent stones in mountain streams, South Carolina's ancient past is a tapestry woven with unanswered questions. Each site we've explored, from the contested tools at Topper to the submerged landscapes offshore, is a thread in that larger fabric, a single piece of a puzzle we are still assembling. These are not isolated curiosities. They are connected by a common theme, the persistent, haunting presence of the unknown in a landscape we often assume we understand. They remind us that the ground beneath our feet is not just soil and rock, but a living archive, its most important pages sometimes faded, buried, or written in a language we have yet to decipher. These mysteries do more than just puzzle us. They fundamentally challenge our assumptions. The Clovis first theory was a comfortable narrative until a shovel struck deeper in the Savannah River silt. The idea that the Southeast's first peoples were simple hunter-gatherers is complicated by the monumental shell rings and the potential engineering of the Sandhills canals. Every time we think we have the story settled, the land offers up a contradiction, a crude stone chopper or a strangely aligned cairn that asks us to reconsider. This is the true value of these enigmas. They are engines of curiosity. They force us to look harder, to ask better questions, and to admit that the human story here is far older, more complex, and more ingenious than our textbooks often allow. History, then, is not a closed book sitting on a shelf. It is an ongoing excavation, both literal and intellectual. It is the graduate student carefully brushing sand from a shell, the diver adjusting a sonar array over a drowned river channel, the local historian poring over a faded deerskin map in a quiet archive. The next great revelation about South Carolina's past may come from a satellite's laser scan, a DNA sequencer, or from you, walking a familiar path and noticing a pattern in the stones that no one has seen before. The conversation between the present and the past is never finished, so we turn the question to you. After this journey through over 20 mysteries, which one captured your imagination the most? Was it the eerie perfection of the Carolina Bays, or the world-altering possibility of the Topper tools? Perhaps it was the silent sentinel of Dorchester's ruins, or the whispered legend of the Winya idol. Do you have a local legend from your own corner of the Palmetto State, a strange formation, a family story, or a forgotten place that holds its own secret? The search for these stories is a shared endeavor. We invite you to share your thoughts and discoveries in the comments below. If you want to join more journeys into the unknown, be sure to subscribe. Remember, the past is not a distant country. It is right here, waiting just beneath the surface, in the next plowed field, the next deep forest, the next bend in the river, always waiting to be rediscovered.